Alright, folks, today we are going to be talking about how to and whether or not to allow for markets in a Prodhonian socialist economy. Alright? So, first off, the first thing that we need to understand is what do we mean by adding markets into a Prodhonian socialist economy? Well, there are numerous examples of market socialism in the real world that has happened. I think the first one was probably Tito's Yugoslavia. Then came afterwards, I think the USSR then adopted it. And basically, there's lots and lots of examples. Pretty much nowadays, almost all socialist countries are market socialist, except for Cuba. And I think Laos. But ultimately, how does a Prodhonian socialist economy change that? Well, in normal market socialism, the market sector is allowed but extremely highly regulated in all avenues of the economy. However, in Prodhonian socialism, the markets are only allowed on the pseudo-macro level, meaning the industry planner level. Alright, so it's above workplace, but below the general market planning. Alright, so that's where the markets are going to be placed. So, now that we know what a market Prodhonian socialist economy is, let's look at the pros and cons, alright? So, the pros of causing your Prodhonian socialist economy to have markets is the fact that you're not going to have freedom exported to you, likely. I mean, you still might have some, but it's much less likely that you are going to have freedom exported to you, if you know what I mean. And you will also have access to a lot of resources and services that would be impossible in your country's area. Alright? But having markets does have a few cons. Namely, that capitalist companies are not going to like the fact that you're socialist. And there is a very decent chance that the first opportunity they have, they will backstab the country. Alright? Also, adding in markets adds in new complexity and new problems that result in the economy becoming way more unstable than it would be if there wasn't a market economy. Ultimately, though, whether or not a Prodhonian socialist country decides to add markets or not is entirely based on that particular country and what that country's needs are. For example, if the country is really being threatened by certain powers, they might want to embrace markets, but when otherwise, they would absolutely reject them. Just to get those certain powers off their backs. But now, let's actually remove our focus from the country's point of view, and now let's move the focus to the company's point of view. Because once you've established markets, you want companies to want to come to your country. So, what are companies going to get out of this? So first off, here are the rules that a company is going to have to... These are the things that allow for companies to take place. Alright, we know that it only happens at the middle layer of the economy, but how else would you allow for markets to exist? Well, first off, domestic markets are not going to be possible in a Prodhonian socialist economy. That's not going to be possible. Foreign markets are possible, and this really the only benefit of having markets would be to have those foreign markets. So no domestic markets, that's not really as much of an issue. But we also have something else that allows this to happen, because as you can imagine, you cannot have a capitalist company taking a labor currency. Otherwise, they are going to lose all of their profits every single day, which is going to be a massive pain in the neck. So, in order to allow for capitalist countries to function, you would have a country with basically two currencies: the labor currency and a fiat placeholder currency that occurs whenever labor currency is paid to a company from a foreign market. Alright? And because companies in foreign markets consistently use fiat currency, they have no problem with using fiat currency. There's no problem at all with using fiat currency. So it being a fiat placeholder is really, really good. But companies are also going to have to follow two rules in order for this to work. Number one, they're going to have to exchange all their earnings into another currency by the day-night cycle. And I'm not talking about just transferring the labor currency to the fiat placeholder. I'm talking about changing the fiat placeholder to a different country's currency in order to keep their money. And the reason is because of how the conversion is between labor and the fiat placeholder, if they keep the fiat placeholder money in an account inside of the country past the day-night cycle, then it will result in extreme hyperinflation that will only affect the companies using the fiat placeholder currency. Okay? So it actually would make it really unstable for the companies. And number two, they have to keep the workplace management into the hands of the workers and follow the planning process. If they don't do this, then that means that resources are going to be withheld from the company. And by resources, I mean the only resources they're going to get are resources that are paid to them by customers. And that's very unlikely, because customers are more going to want to use their labor money instead of directly trading resources. Because these companies will not be able to buy or sell. And this is an intelligent, this is actually a very good precaution to make, because it strongly discourages that company from ever, backstabbing in that way. And it allows for the rest of the economy to move fairly smoothly under these companies without much of a difference. Alright? Basically, ultimately, the goal here is to make it to where the people don't see much of a difference when companies come, but there's a big difference on the company level. Now let's look at some of the benefits that companies would receive. So companies would receive primarily 5 main benefits. And each of these benefits are, they got multiple aspects to them. So the first one is that workers will end up accepting no pay, but they will have the quality of paid work. And the reason that occurs is because it is not the responsibility of the company to pay the workers, but the workers end up paying themselves because of how labor-backed currency works, they automatically produce new labor backing for their paycheck every single day-night cycle. Alright? So it literally creates new value to back new money. And it's immediately given straight to them with no bumps in the road. And that means that a company can keep all of their profits and they do not have to pay their workers, but their workers still get paid in the end. So their workers still have the quality of paid work. We also have a situation that because it is a backed currency and not a fiat currency, there is not a major problem with inflation. In fact, it has very little inflation. So that means that in the global market, all the money that the company is going to earn from this country is actually going to increase in value over time because it's not going to have nearly as much inflation. So just earning money in a market Prodhonian socialist economy would be a major investment. Then we have the fact that there is no need for taxation on the company because resources are directly allotted from the governmental entity that is the economy to the government, completely negating any need for taxation. So the rest of the economy pays taxes while company, or rather the equivalent of taxes, it's not really taxes, while the companies, they're tax-free. So they don't have to pay for their workers. The value of the currency is going to increase over time, and they don't have to pay for taxes. They're also going to get set resources, especially if they behave themselves on those two rules that I described earlier. If they really behave themselves on that stuff, then they're going to get certain amenities allotted to them for free. Let's say their new business building is going to be given to them for free because of their status as the pseudo-macronational entity. And especially if they are complying with the planning process, that means that in order for the planning process to work, that means that certain amenities are simply just given to them for free. The companies can also benefit on a much more abstract scale, but still a scale that is very beneficial, due to the fact that because the propensity to save in a Prodhonian socialist economy is near zero, that means that the rate of economic growth is near infinity, which means that the total GDP and economic growth within a Prodhonian socialist society, even a market Prodhonian socialist society, is going to be very, very quick, meaning the economy is going to be very strong, almost no matter how small the economy may be. Alright, I hope you liked this video and I hope you learned something. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want to support the channel. See y'all!